Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, a King Killer Chronicle reread podcast.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, Season 2, Episode 66, This Is Why We Choose the Bear, where we will be looking at chapters 130 and 131 of The Wise Man's Fear through the lens of Deception and Retribution.
Editing me? I think Will meant to say 65. This is episode 65. On with the show.
So, I gotta say, I recognize that we did change the name because you had a different one there, which was essentially just No True Scotsman?
Yeah.
Which I think works from Kvothe's perspective more than it works from our perspective.
Well, it works because it's the name of a logical fallacy that Kvothe is guilty of.
Yes. And I, again, say I think that it's more of a Kvothe POV than a us POV.
What I think is it's useful to analyze where Kvothe makes this logical error.
Yes.
When he starts talking about his justification. And this is less about his justification, and that's stuff we'll get to later.
So, dear audience, I'm going to be real here. I don't like this section of the book. There are some things that are just super ooky in it, and it's not the same way that, like, Florian sections are super ooky, or Man Mothers is kind of...
There's discussion here about sexual assault.
Right.
And
content warning.
Yeah.
Everything that could be a content warning about that. Seriously. It's gross, but we're also supposed to, I think, maybe either acknowledge that Kvothe views himself this way, or we're supposed to view him as kind of that savior figure. I really hope, and my critique of it would be that I'd want to make sure that we're focusing on the fact that Kvothe views himself that way rather than us supposed to view him that way. Because even the way that he is, quote, a savior figure is... I wouldn't want to run into him either. Like, the whole, this is why we choose the bear thing. The thing about that, and I promise we'll get into disclaimers and everything soon, but the thing about that is, so I've seen something recently that stuck with me, and it's someone who is an artist that I follow on Facebook that has been getting message after message after message from, quote, well-meaning men, quote, trying to have a logical, quote, logical discussion about this, who miss the entire point. And they're like, so what if I showed up to the woods with a truck and a bunch of guns that could kill the bear? Okay, I'm not going towards a dude in the forest that has a truck and a bunch of guns. I mean, I wasn't going towards a dude in the forest.
Yeah, you don't know if the guns are for you.
Right. And the fact that this guy was so combative doesn't make me think that they worked for me.
Yeah. Fundamentally, when I look at it, bears operate on a fairly narrow spectrum of behaviors that are relatively predictable.
Yes. This is the point of this whole thought experiment. I have been with someone at night walking on a trail and had the thought come into my head of, if he killed me, no one would notice for at least a few days. But
I'm glad that you are no longer with him.
I am too, but I did have that thought.
I'm really sorry that you had to go through that.
Because I was like 19, 18, 19, something like that. And I did have that thought. I've actually legit walked home, at night with my keys Wolverine style between my fists, right? Like, not that it would have done a whole lot, but I did do that. And that is a thing that happens. When I was like 17, 18 years old, I was a courtesy clerk for a grocery store. And the rule was, if they have 2 or more bags, you have to offer to help take it out. So I offered to take out the groceries for this one dude because I had to. And then as I was leaving, he grabbed my hand and he kind of made a gesture with his middle finger against my palm.
Ew.
And I asked to not have to go outside again after dark.
Yeah.
It's gross. It's absolutely just disgusting. It's gross. And the fact of the matter is that you don't want to be around a guy who doesn't understand why we choose the bear. All that aside, gonna go to the disclaimers now, but content warning. Short explanation of the pod. Each week we'll be examining a section of the Wise Man's Fear through a chosen lens and figuring out what can we take from the text and apply to our real lives. We will also take time to focus on a Phronimos of the week. Holy buckets, this is not a good one to try. I don't want.
No.
I'm stuck with that. And
You
then
can just say no one.
I might. And then we will share a recommended thing of the week. Finally, we will wrap things up with 7 words from the book and 7 words from our own lives. And I just want to let everybody know that we are not affiliated at all with Patrick Rothfuss or his publisher, Books. And we assume that you've read the books that we are talking about or that you don't care about spoilers. Here be spoilers. Also, word to our community, please be kind to yourselves, one another, and the creators of the worlds that we love exploring. I think this is the last episode for Pride Month of 2024. And so, happy Pride Month to everybody that has anyone in their family and or are themselves any part of that rainbow, including us.
So let's start with chapter 130, Wine and Water.
All right, I'm going to try to keep this short. I don't want to analyze too much more than we kind of need to. I don't want to get too far into things.
So we kick off with Kvothe leaving Hert. He says his goodbyes, and he knows that he's got to make his way back to Alvaron to complete his mission.
And so he takes an entire day. He shares a meal with Vachette and Tempe. He gets a lot of advice that he frankly doesn't want. And Cillian actually cried and told him that she would come visit when she finally took the red. They bouted that one last time, and Kvothe really does think that she let him win.
And he gets several last rolls in the hay with Penthe.
And then to just kind of, I don't know, dig in a knife, he says, still, it felt good to be back on the road again, heading towards Alvaron and Denna. Oh, he still hasn't learned that this isn't the best option.
Although at least at this point he realizes that he does owe her an apology.
Oh, thank goodness.
That's honestly, it's a baby step.
So 5 days later, walks along a lonely stretch, not sure if he's going to have a place to sleep. And then he spots a line of white smoke trailing into the twilight sky ahead and hears a faint strain of music, which I'm going to say this. That faint strain of music belies everything else that he says in this chapter. Because during the chapter, we are led to believe that these are imposters that don't know music, that can't possibly be Rue. That, like, those are some of the clues that you get, is that they pass on actually singing and they don't actually play the instruments and all these other things because they've stolen the wagons. Not sure. Anyway, the gist of this is he gets past the sentry, he comes up against the people that have the wagons and immediately gets a bad feeling because they're not friendly.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've known about his description of the Rue up to this point is that strangers are greeted with hospitality until proven otherwise.
And that there are rules about offering water and not wine first. And there are rules about how you treat a guest. And there are kind of rituals.
Yeah.
His memory from when he was 12 and younger make it feel mystical. And this encounter ticks a lot of suspicion.
The way he describes a lot of the figures, like they're sour-faced, squinty-eyed, they have hard looks about them.
They're suspicious.
And Kvothe apparently passes the tests or whatever and manages to ingratiate himself with them.
But they don't ingratiate themselves with him. He sees a lot of uncanny valley wrongness.
Yeah, these are the sorts of little bits of circumstantial evidence that something is wrong, something is amiss. Like, so one of the things that I noticed is anytime Kvothe mentions, oh, the stew tastes wonderful or whatever, they talk about nicking pepper, like stealing, and like everything is mentioned as being sort of stolen.
Or that they had good luck in the last town they were in because they were able to take a lot of things.
Yeah. Like, and we know that Kvothe knows that one of the stereotypes about the Edema is that they steal everything that isn't nailed down.
And one of the things that his family took pride in is not doing any of that.
Yeah.
And so we're introduced to a cast of characters that don't matter, just flat out. Another thing that bugs me a lot is that there's some casual joking about like homosexual acts that I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a signal to the audience that these guys are assholes and bad, or if, I don't know. Because sometimes in order to tell your audience that you shouldn't like a group of people, you make the group of people punch down.
It's sort of the kick the dog thing.
Yeah, like the whole reason that we don't like the people that are the enemy in John Wick is that they killed his dog. But yeah, so I guess in this little interaction, the only thing that is something I want to note is that there's a woman making a stew, and Kvothe makes a show of being uber polite in order to poison it.
Yeah.
Like, he's been there all of 5 minutes, and he's all of a sudden known that this was not a troop of Edema, and he doesn't know what they did with the real Edema, but he knows that these are not real Edema. And so he kills them all.
The other thing that's kind of striking here is because he ties it to that identity, not what they have done.
Right, because like they did do, quote, did do legit bad things. Like he does this, presumably, he poisons the stew before he finds out about the girls and before he hears all of the things about stealing. He just goes berserk on them. Like he just poisons their food.
Yeah, well, he kills them in cold blood.
Waiter.
This is basically premeditated murder, though, on his part, that he
Yes.
said, okay, I'm going to poison them and then I will hunt them down and kill them all. Like he's made up his mind that that's the course of action he's going to take.
Before we as an audience get more justification than they stole some stuff.
Yeah, it's...
Oh. Anyway, back to the thing I don't like reading. And so, like, he asks a bunch of different questions of them that should be immediately answerable with the correct answer by true Edema, true Scotsman. Like, do you know Leave the Town Tinker? Can't say that I do. Everyone knows that song. You're on the edge of the map, both. Maybe not everyone knows that song. You were 12 when you last were part of a troupe, and you went to perform at a place that a lot of other people were performing. These are all people that have a repertoire that might be wider.
Or just different.
Or different. You're right. And so instead, Kvothe plays and gets the adoration of this group of bandits. So he says. They ask him to stay with him, and he's just like, well, I'm going the other direction. And then, like, I get, so 1 is a bad number for an edema on the road. You know, logic. A lot of this is fake logic. And Kvothe is like, ask me again in the morning. And then, like, I don't know, like, he gatekeeps songs that these people should know if they are truly Edema. He prevents them from proving their chops of actually singing anything for him because he has determined that they aren't who they say they are. And then he sings a different song, leaving off 2 verses that would share his intention to murder all of them.
Yeah.
And so the way that Kvothe says it, like, they're trying to bribe him to stay. I think they're trying to bribe him to stay to add legitimacy to their troupe, or at least that's what we're supposed to glean from his story. And then, again, with that mysticism, kind of that storyteller attitude that he has, it's like, I will stay with you, but I ask 3 things. This is narrator Kvothe trying to add whimsy to Murderbot Kvothe.
So he's asked for 3 things, the first of which is a tent.
Separate from everybody else. He says he's a snorer. You all don't want me in your camp. I'll go over there.
The second thing, Alec, the leader of the troop, offers Kvothe the company of 2 girls that they have kidnapped.
One of 2 girls that they have kidnapped, because of course the other girl has to be for another person. And Kvothe shows his virtue by rescuing both of them from certain sexual assault.
We know that just by looking at them, they're both shell-shocked, probably drugged,
Almost certainly.
and they're traumatized.
They've been with this troop for 3 days because they were stolen from the last city that these fake Rue were in. We start to get an understanding that at least one of the troop is sick to their stomach, and he has to go off into the woods and open the sluices. Blech. And just this whole... It's gross because the girls that are brought... So one of them is a lovely young woman that had a lean body and face with straight black hair cut short like a boy's, or, just cut short. The other one was curvier, let's just say curvier, with curling golden hair, and they were about 16. And mind you, Kvothe is 16 or 17 at this point.
He's of an age with them.
Kryn and Ellie, so they're brought to the campfire and forced to eat, although only one of them does. And the other one just stares at her bowl and is obstinate about it. And then in one of the things that's pretty obvious that Kvothe also has poisoned the ale because he's not drinking any of it. The girls are forced to drink some ale, and both of them do. And I don't know, I don't really want to get into the descriptions of what happened, but the thing of note is that one of the girls, Kryn, she moved her eyes from the fire to me. I felt an almost physical shock at her resemblance to Denna. I'm not wholly convinced that Denna isn't of the Fae somehow, or that there's not time shenanigans with her, though that would be a very shoehorned explanation. But we also don't know if Denna has siblings. We don't know anything, or if it's just a resemblance that Kvothe is.
I read it as a coincidental resemblance. Sometimes people just look a little bit similar to people and they bear no actual close relationship at all. But we make that connection and it affects the way we act around them. And I think this is meant to be the thing that kind of maybe spurs Kvothe to some of his actions.
I don't think so, though. He already planned on most of this.
Planned on most of it, but I think this is where he starts... let's put it this way. This is just more fuel for the fire.
Yeah, it's additional justification.
Yeah, because remember, he planned to do this before he even knew that there were prisoners.
Right.
So he takes the 2 girls back to his tent, and then we start the next chapter, Black by Moonlight.
Oh, well, but let's just be clear in the 3 things, right? This is the second thing I ask for both of them. Yay, Kvothe! We don't think that you're going to assault them.
They have no way of knowing that.
They do not. At the end of the chapter, and I think this might again be a little bit notable, because nothing that Pat writes is accidental. Then I led both lovely girls, one golden and one dark, to my tent. Similarities to Ari and Denna.
I think these are meant to be callbacks to the 2 women in his life that are the most important. One a sun figure, one a moon figure. And I think it's just meant to be a little bit of narrative symmetry. It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yep. Thanks, George Lucas.
But I don't think it's meant to literally be tied to them.
Right. I think, again, it gives Kvothe extra justification.
Yeah. So moving into chapter 131, Black by Moonlight. In his tent, Kvothe gives Kryn and Ellie a countertoxin for the poison in the stew and the ale.
Ellie takes it because she's docile.
And Kryn is skeptical of it, and rightfully so. Her experience over the past week has been being drugged, being poisoned, being abused.
And so Kvothe, thinking that he is better than the bear, says he was trying to capture the tone of voice that Felurian had used to gain my thoughtless compliance from time to time. He explains that he can't take any of the countertoxin because it would put him to sleep. And he says, and I have things to do tonight. And Kryn she's been assaulted. She has already been assaulted. Both of them have been assaulted. And Kvothe, ever the gentleman, I smiled my gentlest, saddest smile. Not those sorts of things. Now, I'm going to point back out that Kvothe too has been assaulted, presumably by Pike, but in Tarbean, we know that he was assaulted. So we know that Kvothe isn't going to do anything to them. They don't know this.
Right. And remember, all that they have seen is this public friendly face that he has put on for their captors. And they don't know what's real and what's the lie.
Again, a sentence that says, she looked at me with the dark eyes of a young Denna. I froze with my hand on her cheek. Shouldn't be touching her, Kvothe.
Yeah.
And then she either fell asleep or just pretended to. And he meditates with Caesura or Caesura across his knees and rages. I have known people, notably a pretty good friend of mine from about 15 years ago, who have this reaction to the idea of innocents, specifically women, being assaulted, to the point where he couldn't read a book that I had read that I probably wouldn't read now, that essentially was a whole bunch of non-consensual, like BDSM-esque, but not consensual stuff that he just noped the fork out of. So I do know some guys that are like this, where they value themselves as being the safe option and think of themselves that way because they would inflict violence on people who would be violent towards women.
I think part of it is young men are given superhero fantasies where they're the person who saves the day because of their strength and power, and that power can always be trusted.
They think that they're in the Avengers when they're really in the boys.
Yeah. And it's really easy to look at superheroes and say, oh yeah, I would totally be like Captain America if I got superpowers.
Altruistic and all of that stuff.
But if we look at just the actual MCU movies, the thing we come to see is that Steve Rogers represents the exception rather than the rule.
Also, Steve Rogers still leaves a ton of destruction in his wake.
Yeah. Like fundamentally, there's just no way to really separate out the exercise of raw power from malice a lot of times. Again, human motivations are complex. They can go all over the place. And, if we consider the whole, would you rather encounter a bear or a man? A bear has pretty simple motivations: food and not food. Food, protect territory, protect young. That's pretty much the long and short of it. And you can pretty easily work around a lot of that. Oh, it wants food. I am going to make myself not food. Oh, it's protecting its young. I am going to steer clear of its young.
It wants to protect its territory. GTFO.
Yeah, I'm going to leave.
Yes, a bear is dangerous. Yes. Predictably dangerous.
Yes, and there are strategies that are pretty effective for dealing with that bear. Just a human being, though, and particularly a man.
And I'm going to say this as a person who was, plain language, abused by both a man and a woman, because my ostensible parent was also abusive. Not predictable. Although, one of them was not predictable in the way of, I don't know if the same thing will set you off that set you off yesterday, or The other one being everything sets you off. There isn't a safe option. So predictable in that way, yeah, sure. Like, you have to just protect yourself all the time in both scenarios. Doesn't matter.
And yeah, when you are encountering a stranger in the forest, you have to take it as an article of faith that they're going to be good neighbors, that they're just passing through and mean you no harm. And that faith is pretty foolhardy if we actually look at a lot of people's experiences.
I mean, let's just face it. The troop, quote, troop, should have chosen a bear.
Yeah.
Kvothe is the dude in the forest.
Yeah.
Back to the story. Things of note. There was a solid crescent of moon hanging in the sky, and everything seemed very bright. Violence, 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 violence. Essentially, he just, in cold blood, kills everyone. There's descriptions of more violence. Things that sound like logical things, or like the style of writing that Pat does, like, but a knife is enough to kill a man. In the end, he comes away having killed a whole bunch of people, dragged them back to the wagons, because, yeah, that was thought about. And then he has a gut wound.
We don't know how bad.
Not yet. It took him all night, and he pretty much goes back to his tent and collapses. The one other little thing of note is the sentence, "I might as well wish for a piece of the moon." Yeah. I wiped my sword, sat in the wet grass in front of the tent, and began to think. So, I mean, at least he doesn't terrorize the girls anymore. They probably heard him murder a bunch of people if they roused from sleep at all.
Yeah.
That's not traumatizing.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, let's discuss the Phronimos of the week.
There isn't one. I'm just not. No. Mm-mm.
Well, that makes that a short segment.
The closest we have is Kryn, and she's not really a character so much as a ragdoll that looks like Dinah.
Right. She doesn't really have a whole lot of agency. And yeah.
She doesn't have any agency.
Yeah.
Except for, I'm not going to put food in my mouth.
Right.
Or I'm going to trust what is maybe the lesser of two evils. All right, cool. No Phronimos.
So let's get to thing of the week.
Yeah.
Let's talk of happier things, shall we?
Yes.
So, as you probably all are aware, Phoenix and I are both fans of the band Ghost.
I don't know. Did we actually ever say anything about that?
I have.
Okay. Because Will was definitely a fan before I was, and I have a different relationship with the fandom than he does. But, like, I love almost everything that they've ever produced song-wise. And I find the lore to be entertaining, if silly.
So, just this past week, we got a chance to go see their feature concert film, Rite Here Rite Now.
So good.
By the time this episode comes out, it's probably not going to be in theaters anymore. However, as soon as it's available on streaming or digital or Blu-ray or whatever, we recommend that you check it out.
Yeah, it was a limited release, and I think the last day was June 27th.
I think that's right.
Which means, actually, I'm pretty sure that this comes out after Pride Month. Happy Pride Month and past.
That said, the soundtrack is going to be coming out here next month, so check that out.
The new song for it, so good.
New song is really good, and also just seeing the live versions of a lot of these songs that, you know, we've come to know over the years. They managed to put new spins on it, and they play it with a bit more aggression and just oomph.
I think that their live shows, having seen some of them on YouTube, are just spectacular, for one thing. They are a good band in studio. They are a great band live.
Not only that, we also get more crucial lore, things that move the band's story forward. Not going to go into spoilers here because, you know, it's worth seeing the surprise on your own.
And again, as someone who isn't, like, super invested in the lore, it was still worth it.
And also you get to have Troy Sanders from Mastodon voicing the narration. So it's a lot of fun.
Also, lots of nameless ghouls. Just, they're my favorite part.
Yeah, the ghouls are great. Pop is great. Sister Imperator is great.
Absolutely.
Papa Neil pretty funny.
Does Tobias actually play him, or is it somebody else?
It's somebody else.
Okay. Because I know that on stage, the ghoul that is Swiss ghoul, it pretends to play the saxophone. He doesn't really dress up as Papa Nihil.
Yeah.
Neil?
I think they pronounce it Nihil.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a good time, a lot of great fun, and we strongly recommend it.
Absolutely, both of us do. It was so much fun to watch. So now, 7 words.
You have the words from the book.
Oh, goody.
I'm sorry.
Uh-huh. That's okay. You get to be the one that does any of like the justification of his actions.
Yeah.
I'm just going through a couple of these things and just seeing if there's anything I want to actually. Can you play Leave the Town Tinker? Thanks for gatekeeping, Quoth. When I was done, everyone applauded enthusiastically. Because your ego needs to be stroked. That's the only thing. But I would ask for 3 things. Just like in one of the stories. Still looking. Nope. I do think that kind of means that has to be it. Just like in one of the stories. But I would ask for 3 things. What would you say?
I think let's go with just like in one of the stories.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, like the way I think of it, it is just like in one of the stories in that this is just like what one of the heroes in a story would do, except we get to see all of the gruesome details of that story.
All of the
Yeah.
Cool. Rest and be at your ease is also a thing that would be a good 7 words if it wasn't in the middle of this.
Yeah. So I have 7 words from life.
Yay!
These come from Papa Emeritus IV,
from Ghost.
also known as Cardi, short for Cardinal Copia. If you can't
Fork
someone,
fork
yourself. With that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone. Join us next time on Tales from the Waystone as we discuss chapters 132 through 134 of The Wise Man's Fear through the lens of No True Scotsman.
Because, of course. We would like to thank our friend Shawnee Jane for our theme music.
And many thanks to Patrick Rothfuss for creating a world that we've enjoyed exploring.
Even though we don't like this part. Audio production, editing, and I'm just going to say social media coordination because it's part of my spiel. Courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough.
And writing and project management, courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
If you would like to help support us and have the means to do so, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page, patreon.com/waystonepod. We just released a new Sandman episode. That one actually might be a lot more fun than this episode. Just throwing that out here. Anyhoozle, with that, here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding!
And he gets several last rolls.
Hold on.
Holes in the ray.
Nope.
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 Not better.
Nope.